Welcome to our panel session this afternoon on the challenges of MiFID II. And up here with me, I have three panelists who I'm going to get to introduce themselves to kick off with. So Chris, starting with you.
Chris French, I work for Euronext, the European Exchange Group. I am post-trade commercial manager, which includes our MiFID II reporting services for trade, publication, transaction reporting, as well as a financing platform, which I'll probably talk less about today.
I'm Andy Young. I work for an organisation called Colt, and I'm responsible for global sales of our solution business and also responsible for something called PrismNet, which is our global financial services extranet.
I'm Edo Pickel. I'm heading the sales at Capitec. We do regulatory reporting. We are part of PrismNet of Colt, and very happy to be here today.
Thanks very much. Now, to begin with, obviously, MiFID is the second coming of MiFID, I should say, because we had the first version of it in 2007, which I would probably liken to Jurassic Park. And if I think about MiFID II and MiFIR, which is the regulatory bit of it, it's probably bigger teeth, more requirements, quite frightening if you think about it. It's probably Jurassic World. I don't know if that's a good anomaly, but an analogy even. But that's the way I think of it. In terms of the requirements that are coming in and the challenges that the industry is about to face, especially when it comes to reporting, to give you a proxy, the reporting requirements for transaction and trade reporting are increasing the data items that you have to report from 25 items to 65, and we're increasing from equities only, or equity-like instruments as well, to everything else, which is quite frightening when you think about it, and given that it's coming in less than 6 months' time. So I would like my panelists to think about what that means for the industry. Where do you think the industry is just now with regards to preparedness, understanding of the data reporting requirements? Chris, can we start with you?
Yeah, I think it can't be underestimated the size and scale of what is trying to be achieved by the industry at the moment. If you look at the obligations, as you said, they're scaling up, but also it's not data from one source. What you're seeing at the moment is firms are doing the analysis as to we have to deliver XYZ information to the regulators directly or via an approved reporting mechanism. They have to do that by the end of the year. That is not all coming from one source. There is information there on trading activity. There is personal information such as passport numbers, client IDs, that sort of thing. There's determination as to what type of flow and where those markers come from. There's a lot of sources of information, and the challenge really I think that the industry is facing is it needs to understand that it's not just a plug-and-play solution you need to be smart about where you're getting that data from, who's got access to it internally, who you're passing it on to, and their data security procedures as well as your own. So, for example, passport ID, that should only go to a certain set of people within your firm, and you need to be certain where you're passing it on. These are the types of challenges that MiFID II is presenting to firms, and the firms need to be on top of it, they need to be ahead of the game, and they need to be using solutions that enable them to collate it and pass it on in a most straight-through process as possible.
Sure. And obviously data security, data privacy and issues and concerns about cybersecurity are big at the moment, and they're increasing every day. I think regulators are chatting about it at a global level. Andy, what do you think the sort of the worries and concerns are within the client base that you deal with?
Well, we have quite a unique perspective on the market. We essentially provide the network communications infrastructure. So we get to see the view from the buy side, the sell side, exchanges, as well as ISV and fintechs, and actually provide regtech and fintech services to participants. So I think it presents, there are challenges and opportunities. The challenges, as Chris says, there's just, the volume of data now, as well as the different venues and different areas of data that have to be communicated now, present a huge demand on both bandwidth, but also on the physical number of connections that clients are going to, or participants are going to need to address MiFID II. So our customers and participants now, have to essentially buy more networks and buy more connectivity, yet they're also constrained by, capital constraints. Whereas the opportunities, certainly for, we're seeing a lot more providers coming up with solutions as a service, addressing MiFID II. And that's presenting a whole new marketplace. So like any change in the market, there's both winners and losers and challenges and opportunities. But certainly from a security point of view, it's a big topic at the moment. There's a lot of talk about cloud, and there's a lot of service providers for MiFID II hosting in the cloud. Yet, historically, access to the cloud has been over the internet. Now, if we're talking about passport information and sensitive information now being transferred over the public internet, that's not really appropriate. So I think there's alternative mechanisms now that our clients are looking to actually, for communication, for reporting.
Sure. And Ido, from your perspective, looking at the reg reporting side of things, where are you seeing the biggest challenges coming up for the industry?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge we see is extracting the data, is collaborating all the data files and segments that you have in order to send it in one file to the regulator or to the ARM or to the trade repository. If a client was reporting MiFID I, for example, and he was reporting EMEA, now he has to report MiFID II. How do you manage the overlaps? How do you manage which trade to send where? This is really a big obstacle, and the only thing that is going to solve this is automation, because if we're going to continue working in manual labor, in building Excels, which I said it, I'm not going to say it, but Excel, I'm sorry, using Excels, and so we'll have to, Excels and manual work will provide more problems, more errors, and the number, the extent, the amount of data that needs to be sent in the formats of the regulator and the trade repository and the ARMs, this is the biggest obstacles that we see.
Sure. And Chris, thinking about the opportunities and the new data items that are going to be available as a result of MiFID, obviously it's some degree of democratization, as it were.
I think it's once we get through this process, every firm, if I think about our own firm and what we will be doing and what we've realised as the opportunity for us before I talk about the broader market, what we've realised is that we will have a greater handle on the data that we have internally. That will allow us to run better analysis, to better prepare ourselves for the business and achieve our objectives going forwards. What we're also doing is taking not just the reorganisation of our own data, but through MiFID II, there's going to be a lot more public data from other sources. So all trades in a number of new instruments are now going to be made public, maybe not immediately for very large, but they are going to become public. That visibility is going to be hugely important to add that public data to our own private data to help us provide solutions and to analyse our business. In terms of the wider market, that availability of information, if it can be harnessed and put into the right format, enables any firm trading on the market, from a Belgian retail broker to a large Swiss wealth manager, to understand to a better degree what value they're getting from their value chain of trading opportunities and investment. Now that is going to be something which is very worthwhile to the industry, as long as it can be employed and this data doesn't just get seen as a regulatory obligation. We're working with a number of firms, some large, some small, talking about best execution analysis. We're working with a small firm based over at Canary Wharf called Heckle, who take all sorts of public data to do with stock and the movements in it and the information that's available from their regulatory filings, add that to the information that we have. How can we present that? And we actually present sentiment analysis then through our web app to any retail investor who may want to take that. So harnessing the data, both public and private, is going to be fundamental to allowing firms to improve the level of transparency and grip that they have on their business.
Sure. It seems like it will change the balance of power between the sell side and the buy side to some degree, potentially, as long as everybody does what they're supposed to do in terms of compliance, obviously within the time frame as well. I mean, one of the issues we have being in the UK, I guess, is Brexit happened, or is happening, I should say. And we've got the expectation that we may go a different route in future. There's this sort of possible dichotomy between Europe and the FCA in the UK. Do you think firms are banking on the fact that we'll have a soft implementation deadline in January?
From my perspective, I would say that no regulator I've spoken to has said anything other than be ready by the start of January next year. Firms that have been working with us for a long time, there are probably firms that haven't looked at it in the detail that they maybe should have yet. I think that certainly from a trade publication, transaction reporting, there's a number of those firms that are well down the line now, but there's probably a lot more out there who haven't started yet. Maybe they're expecting delays, maybe they're looking at something to do with Brexit, I don't know. Nothing that I'm hearing is saying that it's going to change that timeline at the moment, and that seems to be the public line from regulators as well. So I think that we will see a rush towards the end of the year, and the providers are going to have to be ready and are preparing themselves as best as possible to facilitate that, because for providers it's obviously great business, but at the same time, if everybody in Europe, all investment firms in Europe come knocking on your door within a 2-month period, any firm's going to see a Russian onboarding, which is going to be tricky to then push implementation.
We see that most sell side are already engaged in long processes and projects since many months back, and we don't think that they're going to be ready. They've put the requirements into 3 buckets. The critical bucket, which they're going to fully automate. These are the processes that they do frequently. The urgent bucket, which they're going to semi-automate, and these are the also again urgent requirements. And the important, which they're going to leave as manual requirements. This is what we see on the sell side, and some of them already know that it's going to be really tough to be ready on January 3rd, 2018. And on the other hand, we see the buy side. Most of them are not ready. I just heard today that 90% of the asset managers are not ready for MiFID II. Actually, I was surprised that 10% are. And most of them are waiting to see what's going on. They're waiting to see if the sell side are going to report for them. But we hear from the sell side that this is unlikely because the requirements and obligation and they cannot take it from the sell side, the buy side, so the risk is too high for them. So we expect that, as Chris said, that by the end of the year, the fourth quarter, the buy side is going to wake up and understand that it's time to be prepared, and the pipeline is going to be really packed. And some of them are going to be at the end of the line, and that's going to be a very problematic time for them, because what we understand, it's on January 3rd, it's going to start, because it was postponed already, and it's not going to happen anymore.
I'd completely echo those comments around the buy side. In fact, I even had the same statistic on my notes there, so I think you've
just photocopied yours.
Yeah. We see exactly the same. The buy side, almost in denial, I think, around what's going to happen in January, and they're all looking at each other saying, well, what are you going to do? And saying, well, I don't know, what are you going to do? And eventually, one of them will do something, they'll all follow. But they've had, so many years of, being serviced by the sell side and their prime brokers that, they've now got to find solutions themselves, which is why, we're seeing the rise of, as I said earlier, fintech solutions as a service, because I think what the buy side will be looking for is, a solution in a box that they can just sign up to very quickly, because they're going to have to move very, very quickly when they come back from their summer holidays in September.
I think one of the biggest challenges from the buy-side perspective is that there's usually leaders out there that are leading the way, and the other smaller asset managers try and follow what's happening. That really hasn't happened thus far, so we're sort of all waiting to see what's going to happen. And they've focused on areas such as the research unbundling, rather than the operational challenges, which is another issue, because it's a very large directive, of course, from that perspective. Chris?
I'd just say that there's a complete range. If you're looking at an asset manager who trades a lot of, say, equities or something like that, they will have a huge reporting obligation, and they're going to be looking for automated solutions, because there is just no physical way that they will be able to do it manually on a daily basis, have it checked by a regulator, and it come back with a big green tick in the box. And then they'll be chasing their tail day to day. There's a whole other raft of firms who are only just caught. So there are probably, I would say, hundreds, but I'm unsure exactly, who trade some instruments that are covered by MiFID II, but not a great amount. It's not the core of their business. And they are the firms that are completely, I think, in the dark. And they need people to offer them solutions as well as the people who are doing 10, 20,000 executions a day. And really, the providers in the marketplace have to be offering a solution which is fit for each of those. And I think that that's something which is going to come because those communities are not ready and not motivated. They may not even know they are caught until their regulator comes tapping them on the shoulder. And it's really the financial industry as a whole needs to look around and work out how it's going to move these challenges forward and make sure that as many people as possible are ready.
Well, I think the other point is normally the last thing on the to-do list is the network infrastructure and the IT infrastructure. Everyone's thinking bigger picture, and then suddenly it's well, how do I actually connect to APAs and ARMs, and what's my physical infrastructure going to look like? This is where I do the sales plug. We've built an extranet, and we are bringing on providers like Capitec. We connect to MiFID compliant venues like Euronext. What we're trying to build is, if you like, a pre-configured network ecosystem. So the connectivity piece becomes, very, very simple. Once you plug into the network, you can access all of those different venues and providers through one interface. Because for sure, we're going to have people knocking on the door in a few months' time saying, well, we haven't even thought about how we actually physically connect.
Sure, and from the data quality perspective for reporting, I imagine that's going to be a bit of a nightmare for most firms, right?
Yes, and I'm going to say again, the only thing that is going to solve this is automation, because data quality is not only getting the right data and getting it on time, is actually having the right data means that you are able to report the right data. And if you won't report the right data, somebody is going to knock on your door, and this is the thing that you want to avoid. So if I would, just give the 1 point to be taken from here is understand how to extract the data from your systems. And by doing that and automate the process, you'll be able to do it correctly. Because also patching old systems and trying to put some patch inside and okay, it's going to be fine, it's not future-proof. And we see that in our environment, the regulation is constantly changing. If I know it's a MiFID panel, but let's take EMIR, for example. EMIR Level 3 is kicking in November. And recently, a month or two ago, the regulator, or ESMA, said that ETDs, for example, are out of scope. So things are changing. If you have everything manually, it's going to be very difficult to do it and to be in line with regulation. So understand how to extract it and automate the process. This will solve 90% of the effort for you.
But I think that's where using the providers that are out there, you do not, and we operate a transaction reporting mechanism. The network and framework we've been trying to build up with other providers of similar services, complementary, be it execution management platforms, be it some of the GCM, the clearing network and the information they hold, works within the community infrastructure providers to try and piece it together to help the end user, because when they do come looking for a solution, it is not A or B. It may well be that there's an option C out there, which is a combination of people they've already got relationships with, which can offer them maybe Colt or whoever. And if you're plugged into them, they certainly can probably help you plug direct into us or somebody else.
Thank you.
I'm conscious we've got 5 minutes left, so I'd like to open it out to questions from the floor if we have any. There's a roving mic, so stick your hand up.
Hi there, thank you. First of all, very interesting. Just curious, do you think the FCA will come down on January the 3rd with like a hammer saying, you've had your time, or given all the delays you've had so far, do you think there'd be a grace period, perhaps Q1, Q2, to get yourself sorted?
I think that's a question I hear often over a cup of coffee or whatever, and I think that the only answer I would give is that it's probably not the optimal route to take that. If you do, you are taking a risk, because I think that from previous regulation where the fines have been dished out some time later, it's difficult to know exactly what you're running up against. And if you speak to the FCA, they will say, you must be ready. then you're the one probably as a firm taking those risks if you're not ready for that date and you're leaving in a period of time. So I wouldn't rule it out, but I certainly would not be looking at our business saying we want to run that risk.
Also think the fact that MiFID II has been already delayed by 1 year, I think they can easily turn around and say, well, look, we've given you an extra year, so you should all be ready.
And don't forget the FCA was one of the architects of it in the first place. So if they've got a point to prove, it's going to be them that's going to prove it, given that they've done the most in terms of fines for transaction reporting. And they sneakily put up the fines by 50% about a year ago. So scary.
So it kind of sounds a bit of a mess. And from the discussion, it sounds like there's going to be a large bunch of firms that are perhaps going to be compliant come January, but with a very suboptimal solution in place. How long do you think the wave of optimization will be post January the 1st?
As a solution provider, we are offering a service for January the 3rd next year, which we believe is what clients want. I don't know that every client, many clients know exactly what they want until they start using it in practice. So I think even the services that people have spent time developing and using, there will be a period of Q1, Q2 next year devoted to fine-tuning either our service on our side as to the solutions that we offer to clients, or on the client side, where they're looking at how they deliver the data to us. They're the clients who are intending and expect to be ready. I still see that happening. So for firms who aren't as ready or coming at this late, it's going to be a knock-on effect even longer, I would say.
I agree with Chris, and I also see some of the companies are still doing some fixes to MiFID I that started 10 years ago. So I think everybody wants to be ready at a certain level on January 3rd. However, if you're doing something on the basic level, and of course according to the requirements, so you're okay, and then of course then next quarter or two it would be for adjustments.
I think we'll see this continuing to permanently evolve, and we're seeing every day new MiFID II providers joining our community, and I suspect that will continue beyond 2018.
I imagine there'll be a load of panic buying again once someone gets fined too. Just bear that in mind too.
Or until MiFID III is in.
Oh, indeed, that won't be long. Okay, with that, I'd like to say thanks to the panel and thanks to the audience for listening.
Thank you.